I was reborn, back to the day I fell in love at first sight and got engaged to a prince. In my past life, my fiancé deceived and humiliated me, using me as a cover for his incestuous relationship with his sister, ultimately framing and killing me. This time, I am determined to reclaim everything that belongs to me. Jill chose to jump off the city walls at the end of her life, full of regret in her final moments. She wished she had never become that man's fiancé, or made a different choice that day. Perhaps then her life wouldn't have been exploited and ended in such a way. Unexpectedly, the gods truly heard her wish, and time began to reverse. Jill really returned to the day of the banquet, awakening to see her parents, who had long since passed away. She remembered that tonight was the celebration of Prince Gerald's 15th birthday. After recognizing everything familiar around her, Jill confirmed she had returned to the past. The man who had caused her death in her previous life was slowly descending the stairs. Upon making eye contact, Jill's first instinct was to run. Her mind was still not very clear, but she decided to escape before finding an effective strategy. Fortunately, she still remembered the layout of the place. To the left was the gallery, and to the right and inside were the stairs to Princess Phyllis's bedroom. In her previous life, Gerald's engagement to Jill was just to cover up his forbidden love with his sister. After accidentally discovering this, Jill was first broken off from her engagement and then framed and executed, essentially to protect the crown prince and his sister's reputation. Unknowingly, Jill walked onto the terrace and temporarily calmed down. She remembered that in her previous life, it was right after making eye contact that the prince had proposed to her on the spot. This time, however, she managed to escape before he could focus on her. But the next second, the prince entered, holding a rose and intending to confess to Jill. Jill quickly made an excuse to escape again and returned to the banquet to think of a reason to refuse him. The simplest and most effective way was to say she already had a lover, but it would be meaningless unless it was someone who could deter the crown prince. As Jill's brain raced, she didn't watch her step and accidentally stepped on a small white dragon. But in the next second, the small white dragon disappeared, and the prince caught up to her. In desperation, Jill retreated to a man nearby, now forced to use this man as a shield. Jill grabbed the man's clothes and declared that she had fallen in love with him at first sight and would make him happy for life. Gerald immediately showed an angry and frustrated expression. Unexpectedly, the man Jill used as a tool accepted her proposal without hesitation. Jill hadn't noticed the man's appearance before, but his voice sounded familiar. It wasn't until he knelt before her that she recognized him. This man could indeed make Prince Gerald step back, as he was the cursed emperor from the neighboring country, also known to become a tyrant who would plunge the country into chaos and fire 6 years later. Now, this man had accepted her proposal and even knelt on one knee. Jill fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she thought she had dreamed it all. But the young version of Hades appeared again, asking her to propose once more because he too suspected it was a dream. Jill recalled her brief encounter with Hades in her past life. As a military god's daughter, she was no match for him, and decided to sacrifice herself to save some captives. The emperor did not harm her or the captives, but instead ordered a full retreat. Jill couldn't associate the ruthless tyrant she knew with the kind and gentle man before her, who noticed she was without shoes and gently put them on for her. Despite her memories from her previous life, Jill was embarrassingly moved by his actions. Just then, Prince Gerald, lacking tact, burst in. Gerald actually intended to compete with Hades for Jill, claiming their engagement had been decided privately, and told Hades not to interfere with their nation's internal affairs. Hades ignored him, but when Gerald resorted to force, Hades no longer held back. He effortlessly lifted Jill in his arms, immobilized Gerald and his men with minimal effort, and walked away with Jill in full view, softly comforting his fiancé. Although it seemed Gerald would not give up easily, as the saying goes, love is always accompanied by challenges. The next second, Hades teleported with Jill onto a ship headed for his empire, Rivalry. Jill found herself kidnapped, and for some reason, there were little girls' clothes on the ship, a thought too disturbing to dwell on. Yet, resigned to her situation, Jill realized she couldn't resist Hades for now. Not only did Hades match her aesthetic perfectly, but he could also conjure delicious cakes. Jill quickly regained her composure and questioned Hades about his thoughts on her age. Without hesitation, he replied that it was ideal. It turned out he had a thing for youth, remarking that Jill had high magical power, making her his dream woman. He joked that a few years younger would have been even better, but it wasn't a deal breaker for his perfect family plan. Jill felt a chill hearing this. Why were all her fiancés so bizarre? At her comment, Hades changed his expression and questioned her intentions about marriage. Jill apologized, confessing her proposal was deceitful due to her difficult circumstances. Heartbroken, Hades released a small dragon that burst into laughter, the same one Jill had accidentally stepped on at the banquet. This dragon was actually the legendary dragon god. Jill was shocked. The legend was true. According to legend, the love goddess of the Crete Empire and the rational dragon god of Lavi fought for 1,000 years before founding their respective nations. Crete was a magical powerhouse, with most citizens born with magical powers, while Lavi had few with magic, but was home to dragons that Crete lacked. Seeing the dragon god confirmed, Jill met all the criteria. Despite the age difference with Hades, it wasn't a significant issue. Jill hastily mentioned heirs, which made Hades blush, saying it was too soon to discuss such matters, revealing his naive side. Surprised by his innocence, Jill realized his exterior did not match his inner self. Hades thought she was implying he had let her down, essentially not wanting to marry him. Hades didn't want to coerce her and offered to send her back. Jill panicked, remembering the obsessive brother-in-law waiting for her and her own proposal. Abandoning the engagement now would make her no better than the prince who used and discarded her. Moreover, this emperor didn't seem like a bad person. So, Jill decided to take responsibility, assuring Hades she would seriously honor their marriage and never break her promise, even if it meant betting her life to make him happy. Hades repeatedly asked Jill if she was serious, and she consistently affirmed. However, she was still just a young girl and hoped to be only nominally married. Before she could finish her statement, Hades lifted her up. Although he was inexperienced with love and romance, he was serious about Jill. He asked the dragon god Ravi to bless his fiancé, and immediately a ring appeared on Jill's finger, marking her as the emperor's wife blessed by the dragon god. Just as Hades was pledging his loyalty, the ship came under attack. They rushed to the deck, but Hades appeared weak and could only have Ravi transport Jill to the port. Jill, unwilling to leave, single-handedly flipped the ship, scattered a cannonball with a punch, and quickly steered the ship back to the port, instructing the guards to take Hades to a place where he could be treated. After Hades was taken away, only Jill and Ravi were left. Before they could decide on their next steps, Jill's rival suddenly appeared, demanding to see Emperor Hades. The girl, Sophia, a duke's daughter from the Ravi Empire and also a backup fiancé for Hades, realized she couldn't win against Jill and declared that Emperor Hades was indeed a pedophile. Hearing herself described as a sneaky little wildcat, Jill was stunned. She had heard of this girl in her previous life. Rejected by Hades, Sophia had gone mad, killed other fiancé candidates, burned down the castle, and killed herself. However, having just met her, Jill didn't think Sophia was capable of causing such events, especially since she had returned with Hades this time. If a similar incident occurred, it could spark a war. Jill, formerly known as a military god's daughter, didn't want to lose her family and former subordinates again. As she reminisced about her subordinates, Ravi suddenly appeared. Jill quickly inquired about Hades' condition and was relieved to hear he had awakened. Ravi also told her that Hades, having heard Jill had met Sophia, had been having nightmares all night. Just as Jill was commenting on this, Hades burst in, dressed as a devoted husband, holding croissants he had baked for her, believing the way to a wife's heart is through her stomach. How could Jill succumb to mere croissants? Then Hades tempted her with eggs Benedict, inviting her to savor his cooking. Indeed, Jill couldn't resist the temptation. After some playful banter, she remembered to ask about serious matters. It seemed Hades had sneaked out of the castle. He wouldn't admit it was because he wanted to see her. He revealed that the daring duke had defied his orders and confined Jill here, and suspected that the same person was behind the attack on the ship. Facing the cursed emperor, the duke certainly had courage. Curious about the curse, Jill probed further. Initially hesitant, Hades opened up after Ravi reminded him that hiding things wouldn't help him win his wife's affection. He explained that he was originally a low-ranking prince with no claim to the throne, sent to the border because he could see Ravi, which his mother found monstrous. On his 11th birthday, a half-brother he had never met, the crown prince, suddenly died. Successive heirs also mysteriously died on Hades' birthdays, as if a mysterious force wanted him to be emperor. Hades insisted on his innocence, and only his brother Prince Weasel believed him. After 5 years, the emperor had no choice but to recall Hades as crown prince, then mysteriously disappeared, and Hades' mother died by suicide on his coronation day. The more Jill heard, the more sympathetic she became. Seeing his fiancé's compassionate expression, Hades felt content. His brother had convinced others around him, and for now, things were stable. However, Jill knew that Prince Weasel would later betray Hades by leaking information to Crete, and Hades would execute his brother and half-brothers. She asked Hades if he felt his family and country were unfair to him. Hades said he was a reincarnation of the dragon god, and it was his duty to protect his people and family. He was no longer worried about the curse, having found a bride blessed by Ravi. Jill sensed Hades was still hiding something, but knew it wasn't the time to press further. She asked what he planned to do next. The Duke was now their overt enemy, so Jill volunteered to stay and gather intelligence, leveraging her position as Hades' wife, which captured the love-struck Emperor's heart. After sending Hades away, Jill disguised herself as a young boy and sneaked out. Passing by a church, she heard Sophia's voice. Sophia was seeking advice from a priest on how to become Hades' wife. Hades reportedly preferred brides under 14, but she was already 16. Jill listened in disbelief. Suddenly, a group of guards, following the priest's instructions, burst in, and Sophia screamed. Jill couldn't just stand by, so both were captured. Meanwhile, the Duke received a report and hurriedly informed Hades that Jill had taken his daughter Sophia hostage. Hades simply asked how he planned to deal with his wife. The Duke accused Jill of being a spy and criticized Hades for bringing a spy into their midst, blaming him for the occupation of the Northern Division's port. He hoped the division could leave the city once the turmoil subsided. Hades realized this was the Duke's aim and let him handle it, warning that if Jill was found innocent, the Duke would pay a corresponding price. Meanwhile, Jill and Sophia were locked in a dark cell. It was clear Sophia was just being used. Her father sent her, and she had no favor in the Duke's family. After her mother died, her father quickly remarried and sent her to another estate. She often escaped to where dragons rested, and a dragon spoke to her once when she was young, but she couldn't understand its language and felt isolated. After Hades took power and heard she could communicate with dragons, he summoned her to see if she could see something on his shoulder, but Sophia saw nothing. Her father scolded her severely, telling her she should have claimed to see it. However, Hades remained gentle, having tea with her monthly. Sophia confessed her feelings to Hades before he left for Crete, but he rejected her because she wasn't under 14. Unexpectedly, Hades brought back a young girl from Crete. Jill felt indifferent about the story. Although she wanted to help Sophia, it was clear that her father and the priest were complicit. Even if they managed to escape, she would still be pursued as the mastermind behind Sophia's kidnapping. Just then, 2 more people were brought into the cell, and Jill instantly recognized them. Tears streamed down her face. They were her most loyal subordinates from her past life, 2 of the many companions she had lost. In this new life, nothing had happened yet, and everything could still be changed. This time, Jill didn't want to lose anything again.